Disclaimer: this episode may include graphic descriptions of crime and criminal activity. It may therefore not be suitable for listeners under the age of 18 and people who may find the descriptions disturbing. Listeners' discretion is advised from this point forward. Hello and welcome to this episode of Crime KE podcast. My good name is Ajuma and I am a journalist from Kenya and your host for this true crime podcast. This week's episode is a bonus episode, and I also think that this is the best episode to kind of segue the podcast into the next season. I will tell you what our next season of this podcast is and when it will be available at the end of this episode, so stick around. Now, today's story is very heartbreaking. I remember the first time I read about it, it was on a thread on Twitter. And I remember wondering how even the youngest of men can have the most evil intentions towards women. This incident happened in 1991, and since then, research has been done and published in international journals even. Most of them talk about how abuse happens and how men, especially African men, are raised to disregard women. I mean, look at how women are treated in situations where there is violence and war. Look at what happened in Congo when women were raped and burnt to death during a jailbreak. Like, a male prisoner has broken out of jail, but his first priority is not even his freedom. He has to make sure that the women in the adjacent jails are harmed before he escapes. So yeah, today I will be telling a story of what happened at St. Kizito Secondary School. And the details of this story, I just want to give a sort of another disclaimer that the details of this story involve sexual harassment. So I would just like to excuse those of us who, I don't know how to say it, but those of us who may find the details very triggering. Okay? Yeah. So yeah, without further ado, let us get into today's episode. Also, please stick around until the end of this episode to find out how you can support this podcast. St. Kizito Secondary School was established in 1968 as an all-boys school. The school began admitting girls in 1975, officially becoming a mixed boarding school. Now, in interviews, the girls, who are now women, who studied in the school say that they considered the boys their brothers and they interacted with each other just like fellow students. They never expected that these boys would be the reason for their trauma years later because first of all, they were all teenagers. Okay. By 1991, when this incident was happening, the school had a total of 577 students, 306 boys and 271 girls. All of them were aged between 14 years and 18 years, so all of them were teenagers. In early 1991, James Laibon joined the school as the new principal. He was, however, not received warmly, especially by the students. Now, according to the source materials I used to research for this episode, the students' grievances with this principal were the fact that they wanted changes made to their diet. They wanted eggs and milk from the school farm added to their meals. Now, if you've been in a Kenyan boarding school, then you probably understand how a small issue like that goes unresolved, especially between the administration and students, can escalate. I would like to think that our school systems have evolved since 1991, but even in recent years, we've seen cases of arson in schools over issues that really didn't have to get to that point, in my opinion. Some sources say that the students had issues with school fees. I'm really not sure what caused the tension, but These are some of the reasons that are cited in the source materials as the cause of the tension in the school. It is reported that the boys in the school had planned a strike over all their grievances, but when they consulted the girls declined to participate in the protest. The principal decided to seek help from the police when the students started sending him threatening notes to his office. He actually took some of the notes to a nearby police station and explained to them that he felt that there was tension among the students, and he actually sought the help of the police to try and calm the students down. Like, one of the notes literally said there will be possible bloodshed. But when the principal tried to tell this to the police and ask for help, he was turned away. He said that the police told him that it was probably nothing serious, which this would turn out to be a mistake, as we are about to find out. Now, despite the threats, the principal stood firm in his decision and chose to ignore the demands from the students. He tried to meet up with student leaders and listen to the grievances of the students, but nothing really substantial or nothing that was able to calm the students down came from that meeting. Now, all this tension culminated in the events of 13th July of 1991. It was a Saturday evening and all the students were in class for evening preps. At about 8 p.m., there was a blackout in the school. Now, the students say that they sat in class and waited for the lights to come back for a while because they thought it was a normal blackout. Turns out it was the male students who had actually switched off the electricity from the main switch so that they could riot. After realizing that the electricity was not getting restored, at least not as fast as they thought, they decided to head on to their dormitories and retire for the day. The girls went to their dorms and the boys went their way too. Now, according to the school watchman, the boys left their dorms shortly after midnight and he could hear them screaming and shouting as they headed for the girls' dorms. Some source materials even say that they were chanting war songs. Now, the school had 2 dormitories belonging to the girls. And when the girls heard the commotion, they decided to huddle up in just one of the 2 dormitories and they decided to barricade the doors. 271 girls in one dormitory. Some of them were hiding under the bed, some of them huddling in the farthest corner, but all of them were just trying to get away from their male counterparts who were clearly looking to harm them. After a while of unsuccessfully trying to get access into the girls' dormitory, the boys gave up and walked away. Now, this whole time, the girls were screaming for help. The watchman had seen what was happening, but no one who heard that, or even the watchman who saw what was happening, decided that calling for help was a good decision at this time before things really escalated. The school was also located in a village where people were living out just outside the school and they could hear this commotion and they could tell their testimonies the next day after everything happened that they could hear the commotion. The police station where the principal had earlier reported that there were threats was actually not far from the school. Nobody really thought to find a way to help these girls. Just researching through this story, I realized that there were several points in the story where things really didn't have to escalate. Now, a few minutes later, the boys returned to the girls' dormitory and they were trying to use stones to break the door and break into the dormitory. After several hours of struggling, the boys broke the door to the girls' dorm and gained access to the girls. And what they did is they started pulling out the girls one by one and dragging them to the school field and raping them. 71 girls were dragged to the school field and repeatedly raped by these boys that they considered their brothers. Like, one would wonder, why are these girls the ones suffering if the boys had an issue with their diet or even the principal? Like, why are the girls sort of paying for their frustration? And going back to what I said in the beginning of this episode, let me just not repeat. I found one source materials that said that there were rumors circulating in the school that some of the teachers were involved in romantic relationships with the female students. And the violent act of repeatedly raping those female students was some sort of revenge. Like, the documentary literally say that the boys thought that if the teachers can have the girls, why not them? Unbelievable. Unbelievable, I know. Police arrived at the school at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. After a whole night of these girls being terrorized, the police finally arrived at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that is when they are met by the disturbing aftermaths of the event of that night. This is when they found out that 19 girls lost their lives in the incident. Most of the girls who died were believed to have been suffocated after the boys forced them into the corner of the dormitory when they broke in. Others died after they were crushed by the collapsing bunk beds as they tried to scamper for safety. You know, the story made big news that Sunday morning. It made international news, and I saw New York Times reporting that there was a quote by one of the members of the school administration who said, okay, I don't want to misquote her, but she said something along the lines of, the boys meant no harm to the girls. They just wanted to rape them. Like, what do you mean no harm? Isn't raping harming them? The principal had also commented that rape was a common occurrence at the school. Like, I could not believe these statements, by the way. Like, what kind of school are we running here? President Daniel Moi visited the school, and it is reported that the president was moved to tears when he was told about the horror that these girls endured that night. He immediately ordered an investigation into the incident, and a committee was formed to investigate the issue. Now, 39 boys were arrested in connection with the incident, and they were charged with rape and murder. After spending a whole year in custody, only 10 out of the 39 were found guilty and sentenced, and the rest were set free. And even those who were sentenced, their charges were reduced from murder to manslaughter because the court found that they were not intending to kill the girls, but to rape them. So, like, it was not murder, it was manslaughter. The student who received the harshest sentence of them all got only 4 years behind bars. The school was closed down and the students were transferred to other schools. One thing that keeps coming up in interviews done by the survivors of that night is that they did not receive support, and support in terms of counseling and mental health support after that night. Most of them say that they are traumatized to this day, more than 30 years later. And apparently, the only form of compensation was 500 shillings that was given to their parents. 500 shillings. The school changed its name, and today it is referred to as St. Cyprian Boys High School, and it only admits boys today. Now, this incident led to the abolishment of mixed boarding schools in Kenya at the time, and till today, that Sunday is referred to as Black Sunday because of the horrible events of that day in 1991. Now, this story drew international attention and outrage, which called attention to the treatment of women in Kenya and even Africa. Now, I'm going to end this episode with a quote from Hilary Mwano, who was the editor of the Weekly Review at the time, and he wrote an op-ed on this incident. He writes, quote, "This tragedy has underscored the abominable male chauvinism that dominates Kenyan social life. The lot of our women and girls is lamentable. We treat them as second-class beings, good only for sexual gratification or burdensome chores. We bring up our boys to have little or no respect for girls." Thank you for listening to this episode until the end. That is all I have for you on this episode on the story of the events of Black Sunday. This case is very heartbreaking, and I can't get over the fact that these girls were failed by everyone in the system. They were failed by the police, their school principal, and the watchman. I even dare say that they were failed by the justice system. Yeah, this is the bonus episode I promised you last week. And you know what? I think I'm going to do 1 or 2 more episodes before we move on to the next season. So yeah, so I just changed my mind. Come back next week for the next episode of this podcast. Make sure to catch the next bonus episode next week. And that is when you'll find out the details of season 2. That is if that is the last episode, which I don't think. I think I still have 2 or 3 more episodes in me. Yeah. You can support this podcast by sharing it with your circle so that we can get a larger community to tune in. Follow the podcast on social media if you don't already. Crime KE Podcast is now available on YouTube. My YouTube channel is at Ajuma on YouTube. You'll find this podcast on the podcast tab. You can find the podcast on Instagram at crime.ke. I usually post the crime cases that I talk about on the podcast, updates on the cases from season 1, and even just educational content that I find insightful. If you have any feedback on the podcast, you can share it through my social media platforms, the podcast Instagram page, or even the comment section on Spotify and YouTube. If there's a case that you want me to talk about here, then you can DM me or the podcast on social media, and then I will get to it. My social media handles are on the show notes of this episode. Reach out. I love interacting with you guys. Give this podcast a 5-star rating on the platform you're listening in on. And don't forget to catch the next episode of Crime KE Podcast on Thursday next week. Same time, same place. But until then, stay safe and remember, it's crime with a K.